cannot believe that I'm here with the great Herman Moore. I mean, what a pleasure to have you here. So much is going on around mental health and athletes, and I think for some of us, growing up as kids, we always saw you guys as like these mythical, like unbelievable folks who can do amazing things. So when we hear some of you all, whether it's Naomi Osaki or Smovia, it's like we're just captured by it. So what is it and why is it, do you think, Herman, that athletes are now talking about this subject of mental health?
I believe the reason why the mental health is starting to become on the forefront is it's being put out into the space. There's optics around it. There's discussion and conversation that didn't exist. I mean, for a case in point, played football. I started playing football when I was 6 years old, and no time during my time of when I first started playing football, all the way up through my career in professional football, which I stopped playing at 33. Not once did I have any evaluation or anyone discussing mental health with me. We talk about our physical fitness, we talk about our nutritional fitness, but there's never any discussion that was around the mental fitness and well-being. And it's great to see because, as you know, there's not a whole lot that you can do without the mental aspect of it. And that's just as important, if not more so important, in everything that we do, from education to parenting to relationships and definitely our careers and our profession.
Wow. You mentioned so many things there in terms of, physical health and, comparing that to mental health. Let's talk about the strength component, because sometimes I think when folks talk about mental health, there's this stigma around it that that's somehow a weakness, So as an athlete, how do you counter that in having that narrative about mental health, but yet trying to balance what sometimes you hear about this weakness associated with it when you start to talk about it?
There is a misunderstanding and conception about mental health being a weakness as opposed to the physical side of it. Yeah, physical means that you're getting your body prepared in a physical sense to take on something that may have some physical necessities to it. But what I've learned, even in professional sports, again, it is the mental piece that I focused and spent the most time on, but it was the one that was given the least amount of attention in terms of how do we nurture that and how do we look at what's good or bad or healthy or unhealthy about it. But it's something that you really have to look at. That's the part that gets us going. That's who's in the driver's seat in pretty much any and everything that we do. But I've learned that if you strengthen that, you become a lot stronger than you will ever be physically.
Wow. During my days, or when I played a little bit of high school ball, there was always the mindset of getting in someone's head, and you never really understood that from a mental health standpoint, but you certainly understood it from a competitive standpoint. So when you talk about this mental toughness, are you associating that with mental health?
Yeah, when I talk about mental toughness, I am associating that with mental health. Okay. There is a pressure point that's there for any athlete at all levels, whether it's when you're first starting out and you're trying to be accepted, and you're just trying to understand how do you fit and how do you earn positions, how do you deal with winning and losing. There's a consequences to when you're talking about sports of, how do you go out and perform at your peak level. I mean, this is athletic ability is something that you have to work on all the disciplines of it. It's not just one piece of it. So the mental side of it is one that now, as I've gotten older and as I look back, and now that we've started to hear more about it and there's been more discussion around it, it is amazing that I realize how little attention was given to it. But that's a big part of the sport.
Wow. So what do you say to young athletes out here, whether you're talking about, high school kids, folks who are in college? I mean, how do you now talk about mental health to that extent that they don't feel that sense of weakness that sometimes is associated with it, or the fact of even bringing it up in conversation? Because sometimes, again, it is that hush hush, no one talks about it, but yet when we hear about it, it's like, wow, so many of us are experiencing it.
In order to make it more accepting, in today's time, in speaking to young athletes, I make that a necessity. It's a necessary part of the discussion. I look at a lot of the coaches and a lot of those who are mentoring or having any type of discussion around that for these athletes. That has to be part of the conversation, and it's because when I look at it, it's not a bad thing. In fact, it's a great thing. It allows us to have a greater portal of communication. It allows us to have a way to come out and deal with a lot of issues that I think in the past we've kind of swept under the rug. And some of that's come based on your ethnicity, based on your background and where you're from, based on your family. I start to look back and see how many of my own personal family members, now that I understand there was mental health issues that were happening. And when we say it, I don't know if people think mental health means it's something bad. That's nothing. It's just like if I say your nutritional health or your physical health, it's a healthy part of something that we need to make us whole. And so that's what I look to try and present as a message, and that's a 100% is added. And I like to use myself as a vehicle to be able to present that, because they think that even at the professional level or people that are in the public eye, that we shied away from it way too long, and we've hidden behind our walls, and we haven't been able to share those moments, I think, that will help others realize it's okay.
Wow. I mean, how extraordinary, here it is. We at Detroit Wayne, we want to do so much, and we are doing so much. So what a wonderful collaboration, and having, someone like you who played professional sports for so long talk about mental health. I mean, we have about 1.7 million folks in Wayne County. We provide services to over 75,000. Last year, we served over 200,000 folks who made calls wanting services. I mean, you figure 85,000 of those were kids who we served, or just out of 285,000 school-age kids. So that just tells you the breadth of this thing here. But nevertheless, Doeh Herman, we found that over 75% of folks who need mental health services don't receive those services. And you mentioned, whether you're talking about demographics, or you're talking about race, or you're talking about culture. I mean, does that play a role, you think, in terms of folks receiving services, and how perhaps a stigma is associated with it, depending on what culture you belong to or where you lie?
Yeah, I do believe that the conversations are different based on your social economic status and background, your ethnicity, your community, depending on what your family life is like, whether it be two parents, or whether you have a single parent family, whether you're raised by guardian or siblings, or whatever the case may be, the level of conversation is different. And it was interesting when you were speaking, I was going to ask you the question of knowing that there's such a diverse group of people that need to have this discussion or have these services that you're providing. What are your delivery vehicles and mechanisms to get out to them, to make that's got to be effective? Like, things have changed now in our society, so there's different ways you have to be able to reach these different people. And I'm interested to hear how, do you guys reach out to them?
Absolutely. Look, I tell you, my 6-year-old makes such a great use of tablets and iPads and all of these things. And if we don't make usage of those things, we'll be left behind. Technology is something that we've definitely, grown to not only embrace, but also recognize that the public that's just how folks function now, phones. I mean, so last year, when COVID was just, at its peak, we realized that for our young folks, who were just in this new world here where, they weren't going to school like how they were, in February and January. So all of a sudden, we sat down and decided to come up with 1-800-REACH-US-DETROIT, because we realized that for young people, they text, and I mean, that old idea of picking up the phone and calling, I mean, like, folks don't do that, so we came up with this for young people to be able to reach out to us. And looking at the African-American population of young folks, suicide rate went up over 200%. I mean, that's astronomical. So that was one of the ways in which we adopted. We also realized too that folks within our different communities, whether you're talking about our downriver community, folks in Dearborn, our Arabic community, there were certain reaching out that we needed to do. So again, having certain providers within the network that provide services, and have the resources for those communities is something that we have been able, to really push forward as well. Our customer service department, does such a tremendous job in that initial call that comes in to make sure that we have, folks on staff who can cater to those persons. But I tell you, there is just so much more that we can still do. And so we're still exploring, how are other ways that we can reach folks. So when we get a chance to talk to someone like you, who can talk about mental health, on this level, yet again, it creates another platform for us to reach, a greater audience out here. Folks within our organization, they're so quick to, put out pamphlets and stuff to let folks know about the great work that we are doing. But sometimes I think it's really helpful when we can have, folks like yourself, who, recognize this as something that is not only important, but it's just part of our daily lives, As you were talking about family, I thought about, my own family and folks, whom, that's just uncle, whoever is just being who they are. And the more I've gotten into this field, I've realized that, wow, my uncle was having some challenges and I just didn't know as a kid growing up. And so now that these resources are here, I am really wanting to give to the community and make sure that we are not that best kept secret. And I tell folks all the time, a best kept secret may be a great restaurant, but not when you're in the service of providing services for people, So Herman, let's talk just a bit here about, kids. Kids are part of the work that we do here, making sure we serve about 15,000 kids, on a consistent basis. So what do you do in terms of going to the schools? How do you convey this sort of message about mental health?
It's interesting in terms of trying to reach the kids now. It's a little different. I used to try and do it through sports camps. That was my go-to typically as a professional athlete and even post-career. Now I've started to go where they are, which means not necessarily physically having to go into their space, but as you mentioned, how do we bring in innovative technology? How do we bring in other resources or mechanisms that will allow us to reach them greater? And a lot of that's come through partnerships and affiliations. It's teaming up with where the kids are. It's teaming up with those who already have reach and already have touch points. And then what we do is we just associate ourselves with them, and then we bring whatever our resources are, whether it be me as a person who goes out and delivers a message, or creating a production or media that we can share, to technology, as you mentioned before, to where it's SMS or text messaging or some type of interactive video component. Because we know you have to reach them where they can be reached. And sometimes if we think too far out of the box, it gets us in trouble. So mine is, the thing I've found to be most effective is teaming up with organizations who already have the pulse. And then we come in and we provide the fuel.
Excellent. So my last question for you, when we talk about mental health, there are other social determinant factors to be considered too, whether we're talking about homelessness, whether we're talking about, nutrition, whether we're talking about just access to healthcare. How do you make that part of your conversation, though, and not leaving those other social determinant factors? Because unlike the physical health side, on the mental health side, when we, speak to folks and we want to provide services, we don't forget those other social determinant factors. So how do you weave that into conversations that you have with young people?
The way I'm able to really weave my discussion points into the conversation with a lot of the youth is through transparency. And when I say that, that means you have to be willing to really uncover yourself. And for me, it's letting them know that there is mental illness in my family, letting them know that I've suffered with mental illness and that I've had to go in and work on my mental well-being, and being open about depression, being open about the fact that I may have to at times have medication in order to make sure that things are right. Some people are against that, some people are not. That's not the only way I do it. There's conversation I have with therapists. There's constant checkups that I do. And a lot of that is something that I don't shy away from because it's life.
Yes.
And it's something that has actually allowed me to understand my childhood in a deeper sense, in terms of why I was a little bit slower, a little bit different than other kids growing up, and my development was slower, why I was so moody and angry and wanting to fight and be physical. And then going from there to playing sports and understanding how the 8 concussions in the NFL start to affect me, and then I sweep that under the rug because I think that it's just, that's what happens after the career, and we just accept that. So I let them know that we all have challenges, and that if I can uncover me, and if I can speak with transparency, and they can see that it's okay.
Yes.
Yes. I didn't lose any friends, I didn't lose any relationships, I didn't lose any opportunities. I'm not shunned, and it's not because I was a professional athlete. It's because I'm human, and that's what I try and show them.
Excellent. Greatness on the field and off the field. Herman Moore, thank you so much, for lending some of your great knowledge and just friendship to the folks here at Detroit Wayne. We're truly appreciative of you, so thank you so much.
My pleasure, and thank you for all the goodwill that you do.
I appreciate it. Thank you.